the voice that waited. I am not the God you learned about from a slogan on a coffee mug. I am not a vending machine you shake when the blessing doesn't fall out fast enough. I have been patient with you longer than you have been patient with anyone in your life. I counted the years. I counted the excuses. I counted every single time you promised not today but soon, and I let soon become a decade. I knew you before your mother knew you. I numbered the days of your life before one of them came to be, and in every single one of those days, I reached for you. You call it luck when the car swerved and missed you. I call it my hand. You call it coincidence when the diagnosis came back clear. I call it my mercy. You call it a rough patch when everything fell apart and somehow you still had breath in your lungs the next morning. I call that the sound of me holding a door open with my own body. I did not owe you that. Mercy is never owed. It is a gift. And I gave it to you with both hands, over and over, long after you stopped saying thank you, long after you stopped even noticing it was a gift at all. But I need you to understand something tonight, because you need to hear it plain, not softened, not set to music. Mercy is not weakness, and patience is not the same thing as permission. I was mercy to you for years. Then you crossed me. Second, every door I knocked on. Do you remember the funeral? You stood at that graveside, and for exactly 11 minutes you meant every word you prayed. I remember. I was there. I heard you. And I waited to see what you would do with those 11 minutes once the dirt was back in the ground. You buried them with the casket. Do you remember the night you couldn't breathe? When the walls of that room felt like they were closing in, and you finally said my name like you meant it? I came. I sat with you in the dark. I loosened the grip on your chest enough for you to fall asleep. And when the sun came up, you called it a panic attack that passed on its own, and you went back to living like I hadn't been in the room. I have knocked on your door in the middle of the night, and in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. I have knocked through a sermon you almost didn't go to. I have knocked through a friend who said the one sentence that undid you for a week. I have knocked through a song on the radio that made you pull the car over and cry for reasons you couldn't name. I have knocked through your own children, asking you questions you didn't have good answers for. I do not knock like a stranger. I knock like someone who already lives in the house, asking you gently again and again to let me back into the room you locked me out of. You know how many times you answered. I was patient with the door. Then you crossed me. Third, the names you could have been. There was a city once, wicked enough that I told a reluctant prophet to go warn it. And when the warning finally landed, the whole city turned. Sackcloth, fasting. A king who took off his own robe. I saw it, and I relented. And mercy stood there fully justified, because someone actually turned around when they heard my voice. There was another city, warned just as clearly, that laughed the warning off as a joke told by his own family. And the fire came anyway, because a warning ignored is not the same as a warning that was never given. There was a thief nailed up beside me with nothing left to offer, no good works, no time to make it up to anyone, nothing but a handful of final breaths, and he used them to say my name honestly, and I told him that very day he would be with me. Mercy does not care how late it is. It only cares whether you turn. There was a man who sold something sacred for a handful of silver, and when the weight of it caught up to him, he wanted it back so badly he wept for it, out loud in front of witnesses, and there was no place left for him to stand. Not because mercy ran dry in the universe, because he was the one who had already walked out of the room where it lived. And grief for what you lost is not the same thing as turning back toward it. I am telling you these names because you are one of them right now, and you get to choose which one. Fourth, the day I stopped knocking. There is a day. I will not tell you which one it was, because I do not think you noticed it either. There is a day when the knocking stops, not because I ran out of mercy. Mercy is not a well that runs dry. It stops because you stopped being someone who could still hear it. You called it getting numb. I call it what it is. You built a house with no windows and no doors, brick by brick, decision by decision, and then you had the nerve to ask me why it feels so dark and quiet in there. I am not the one who shut you in. A king once sat at a feast, drinking from cups that were never his to drink from, and mid-laugh, a hand appeared and wrote 4 words on the wall that ended his kingdom before morning. He was not judged for one bad night. He was judged for every warning he'd already been given and waved off before that night ever came. The writing on the wall is never the first warning. It is always the last one. I do not delight in that. Read me right. I take no pleasure in watching a door close on someone I made with my own hands, someone I knew before you knew yourself. But I will not lie to you and tell you a door stays open forever just because you'd prefer that it did. I never wanted to stop knocking. You made sure I would. Mercy died the day you crossed me. 5th, what judgment sounds like. You think judgment is fire falling from the sky. Sometimes, but mostly, judgment is quieter than that, and it is far more terrifying because it sounds like silence where a voice used to be. It sounds like praying and hearing nothing back. Not because I have gone deaf, but because you have finally gotten exactly what you spent years asking for, to be left alone. It sounds like the weight you carry now with no one left to hand it to at 3 a.m. It sounds like standing in a room full of people who love you and still feeling like the loneliest person alive, because the one presence that was never supposed to leave left when you told it to, over and over, in 1,000 small decisions you didn't think I was counting. I counted. There is a scale in this universe, and it is not cruel, and it is not petty, and it does not lie. Every door you didn't walk through is on it. Every not now is on it. Every time you looked at grace and called it weakness, and looked at your own hardness and called it strength, all of it is on it. I am not vindictive. I am simply no longer willing to pretend that later was ever going to come on its own. Mercy died the day you crossed me, and I let you watch it happen because you needed to see clearly what you were choosing. 6th, the ones who turned back in time. I want to be fair to you, because even now, even here, I am still being fair to you. Not everyone in this story ends the way you're afraid you will. There was a man who denied he even knew me 3 times to strangers, with curses in his mouth to make it convincing, on the very night I needed him most. By every measure, that should have been the end of his name in this story. But he went out and wept until there was nothing left to weep, and I did not leave him in that weeping. I met him on a beach with breakfast already cooking, and asked him 3 times if he loved me, 1 for every denial, and let him answer his way back into the story. There was a boy who took his inheritance early, which is another way of saying he told his father he wished he were already dead, and spent every bit of it on a life that left him eating what the pigs wouldn't finish. And when he finally turned around, his father was already running toward him before he'd finished the apology he'd rehearsed the whole way home. The difference between these names and the other ones was never the size of the offense. Some of the worst things anyone in this story ever did to me are the very stories I tell to prove mercy is real. The difference was only ever the turning. That is still true of you, right now, while the first AM still speaking and you are still listening. 7th, the last door. Here is what I need you to understand, and I need you to understand it before you turn this off and go back to whatever you were doing before you heard my voice tonight. This is a warning, not a sentence. I have told you the truth about how far you've walked, and I have told you the truth about what waits at the end of that road if you keep walking it. I have not softened it, because you have heard soft words from me for years, and you turned every one of them into a reason to wait a little longer. But hear this too, you are still breathing. Your name has not been called yet. The door I stopped knocking on from the outside, you can still open from the inside. That is not a contradiction. That is the last mercy I have left to offer you, and I will not pretend it stays on the table forever, because I already told you the truth about limits. Somewhere tonight, for someone hearing this, it is not a threat. It is the last knock. If you can still hear it, that is not too late. That is not condemnation. That is an invitation, standing exactly where it has always stood, waiting to see one more time what you will do with it. I was mercy to you for years. You crossed me, and I am still here. What you do next is the only part of this story I have not already written. Amen.